This is our 1975 Mercedes 280 SL with the Dejectronic fuel injection system, and today I'm going to show you how to make your own smoke detector and check the system for any vacuum leaks. The way we're going to do that is we're going to take some coffee grinds and light them, and then put a little glove over here with a hole on it and use a bicycle pump to pump smoke into our inlet manifold and see if we can see any smoke escaping anywhere, which will indicate a vacuum leak. The first thing we're going to do is just take off this rubber boot here and block the air intake with a rubber glove to seal that part of the system. When you take this out, it's probably best to unplug the air temperature sensor here, but these leads can be quite brittle, so be careful when you do that. So that plug just pulls out. It's the same plugs on the injector harness, and this here is also a pull-off hose. Once you've undone that, you should just be able to wheel this off. And I can tell you from experience, it's a lot easier to get off than it is to get on again. So all we need to do now is just put a rubber glove over here and seal off that intake. You're going to have to block off this pipe here, and we're just using an old rubber spark plug boot for that. You can use an old glove or a wine bottle cork. Next up, we're just going to light our coffee grinds. If you're a tea drinker and don't have access to fresh coffee, you can also dip a piece of rope in some baby oil and light that, and that also creates an awful lot of smoke. Next up, we're just going to put another rubber glove over there. I've cut a hole in one of the fingers and just used a bit of masking tape to tape in a standard bicycle hose, and on the other end I've got a little piece of plastic tubing that's going to interface with our vacuum system. You can see the smoke coming out there. I don't know how well you'll be able to see that smoke coming from just there, but if you had a laser you could shine it down there and then the smoke shows up much more easily on a laser. But looking down there, I can instantly see that whoever put this car back together has made a colossal admission, and namely that there should be nuts on the bottom of there, but there are no nuts. So it's not surprising that this whole front of this intake manifold is leaking through this seal here. So we're going to whip that off and put a new seal on there. Now this intake manifold should be held on by 4 nuts. There's also quite a few other things connected to it. There's the vacuum advance here, and there is the I can't remember what that switch is called, but it plugs in there. And then of course there is also the spring here, which we're going to need to disconnect or take off this arm here as well. Disconnect that vacuum line and this here. Now underneath here, this is actually connected to the water pump via a water pipe, so we definitely don't want to be undoing that, I don't think, otherwise we'll get coolant everywhere. But let's just see how far we can move this. We'll unplug this switch here, take these 2 nuts off, and just see how much wiggle room we've got. One thing I do notice is that every single rubber boot that should be around all of these plugs here is missing. There should be boots on each one of the injector plugs, and there should be boots on that plug there that basically stop you getting dust and moisture inside the plug settings. So we've ordered a set of those from Germany, and I'll do a different video on how to fix those boots without having to cut the wires and remove the whole wiring harness. These are done up so loosely. I'm not sure whether there should be spring washers on those. You would have thought so. On the intake manifold, the bottom 2 holes here are actually open, so you can just slot that on top and tilt it forward. What is quite annoying is to see that somebody's used something on here other than the genuine Mercedes gasket, and we're now going to have to clean all those surfaces off, which is a bit of a pain. The intake manifold gasket for this engine here is actually still available from Mercedes. That's only about £2.30 plus VAT. Part number 110-141-118064. And if you are ever working on old Mercedes, it is always worth checking to see whether the parts are available at Mercedes before you go online and buy them, because you can pay considerably more for stuff like this through Amazon and eBay without realizing that it's actually still available from Mercedes. That gasket is stuck on there good and proper, and to clean it properly I'm going to have to take this home. In order to get that intake manifold off, there are two pipes underneath it full of coolant, and you need to make sure the level of that coolant is higher than the level of the header tank, otherwise it's going to pour out. So we've taken one of the hoses off, just wedged a spare bit of hose in there, and are holding it higher than that header tank there. Now we've just got to take the other one off, which is a bit more awkward. It is a long, laborious job getting this old gasket off. Whatever they used to stick that on there, it's stuck on good and proper. We've pretty much finished cleaning all the old gasket off here. It took absolutely ages, but I can see that somebody has been at this before me, and they've obviously used a wire wheel or something like that to clean this, because you can see fine scoring on here. Now that's not going to matter because this is just an air intake, and tomorrow what we'll do is we'll go over with a Dremel tool and get rid of all of this dirt here. But one thing that really does concern me that I noticed is this here. Why is that not screwed in properly? Because these here are the fibre washers, and to my horror this turned out to be just finger tight, and you can see exactly why they haven't screwed that in all the way. And it's because if I zoom in on that, inside there is a whole load of gunk, and I don't know whether those threads are still any good, but obviously this here should be screwed all the way in so that those washers actually cause a seal. So as per normal, our 5-minute job is turning into something a little bit big. I am just painstakingly going through the threads, and you can see just how much gunk is coming out when I do that. And I'm hoping that I won't have to recut these threads, and that the only reason that wasn't screwed in was that somebody was just too lazy to clean the threads properly. But little by little this is screwing in further, but I don't want to force it. We've cleaned this fitting up on a wire wheel, but it's still not screwing all the way in, so we've switched to plan B and recut the threads using an M12 1mm fine thread tap. And now this is incidentally just some of what came out after cutting those threads, but let's see if now this screws all the way in. We'll have to get a crush washer or fibre washer. There we go. That's how that should sit. Now that won't leak. If we'd have driven this car before with that thing sticking halfway out like that, then as soon as that coolant had heated up, we would have had a leak here, which would have been a bit annoying. I'm so glad I ended up taking that throttle body off, because it was completely blocked with limescale. What we've done is we put WD-40 down, hot water, and we've been blowing down here. And now that is completely clear, but before you could hardly blow down there. The reason being that it was completely blocked up with all of this. We're just about ready to put this back on now. We have put a new crusher washer on here. That's nice and tight now. It's easier to put these hoses on first before you put this on, I think. So we're going to do that now. Next up, we can put the gasket on. Doesn't matter which way around it goes. When we took this off, there are no washers on here, but the picture does show just standard washers. We're actually using stainless steel spring washers. And if you remember, there are actually no nuts at all holding this on underneath. So we're just gonna put some nuts and washers on there. Probably one of the reasons they never put any lower nuts on is because it's so difficult to get to that nut there. I've taken the distributor cap off just to give me a little bit more access, and gone in there with a shorter 13mm spanner, and we've got that nice and tight. Just remember, when you're tightening up any gasket in a nice crisscross pattern. So I think we've got all of that on now. We can put all of this back together and move on to the next task. I'm going to leave this video here. We identified a vacuum leak and managed to fix that by adding not just a new gasket, but actually adding proper washers on here, stainless steel nuts and washers both on the top and on the bottom. We've cleaned that throttle body up and averted a major disaster by retapping the threads in one of those brass fittings. The only thing I haven't done is reconnected all of these electrical plugs, because I noticed that every single one of them is missing the rubber boot, and I finally managed to source not just the plastic plugs but the boots from a company in Germany, which will hopefully arrive tomorrow. So I'm going to do a short video on how to actually change these plugs. I can see that some of them on this car are actually cracked and missing pieces, and in fact the wiring on that plug is terrible. So we're going to be changing some of those plugs and actually putting the correct boots on. If you leave these plugs like that without rubber boots on, you're likely to get moisture and dust inside those fittings, and then your car will start doing all sorts of weird things. I know I've said this before, but it's worth mentioning again. The benefit of working on your own car is, first of all, that you get to do things to your own standard. I doubt very much whether a Mercedes or an independent would spend the time to actually clean these things out the way you might do yourself. And if they did, they would rightly charge you hours of labor for doing so. So not only do you get to do stuff to your standard, but you save yourself a fortune. My wife claims that these are some of the most boring videos that she's ever been subjected to, but they're actually intended for people who've never done this work before and want to actually have a go. So for all those people out there who have written to me and have written to the channel, thank you very much for your comments, and I'm glad that these videos do actually help some of you out there.